Second Africa Climate Summit, co-organized by Ethiopia and the Africa Union, was successfully concluded with the adoption of Addis Ababa Declaration. Building on this milestone, the U.S. Print held a forum titled From Addis to Belem, focusing on the outcomes of the Africa Climate Summit Second and the Africa Youth Climate Assembly 2025. These landmark gatherings produce critical declarations and commitment that will shape Africa's climate leadership as we move towards COP30 in Belem, Brazil. To shed more light on this, I will spend some time with users. I am your host, Goshumal Sao. Do stay with us. Welcome to Addis Dialogue program.
Thank you for inviting me.
What key declarations and commitments emerged from the Second Africa Climate Summit to guide Africa's climate leadership on the road to COP30 in Belem, Brazil?
One of the major outcomes of the African climate is Addis Ababa Declaration. If you can narrow it down to one thing, if we ask what is the outcome of the African Climate Summit 2, we can say it is Addis Ababa Declaration. So before raising issues regarding the Addis Ababa Declaration, we already had the Nairobi Declaration in 2023, and when we compare it to the Addis Ababa Declaration, it has many new things. Regarding peace and security, this is new issue for the declaration. It was not mentioned on the Nairobi Declaration. Peace and security was issues. The Addis Ababa Declaration and also issues related to health was also raised on the Addis Ababa Declaration, and it's more comprehensive when you compare it to the Nairobi Declaration. It is more detailed, practical, and a comprehensive document that is adapted on the African Climate Summit. So regarding one of the issues that was raised is about climate finance. So we always say Africa contributed less than 4% for the global emission, and we are the one who are being affected by the global emission, by the climate change. We are contributing less, but we are getting affected more than any other continent. The major contributor is Asia, and after Asia we have North America, Europe, and South America, and Africa is the one who contribute less affected. Then we asked the Western countries or the polluters to pay $3 trillion. But we're not getting that finance. We did not even get 1%, 2% for the finance we asked. So the leaders decided on the African Climate Summit, we have to focus on African-led solutions and the African finances, because there was an initiative that was announced by Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, African Climate Innovation Compact and African Climate Facility. It was said like it is going to have a solution, 1,000 solutions before 2030, climate solutions, and it's going to raise $50 billion annually only for climate issues. So Africa-led finance have to be focused. This was the issue that was raised beside asking for finance and other things like issues of green bonds, issue of debt swap, and public and private partnerships also raised on the African Climate Summit too. So the leaders agreed that adaptation is a priority for Africa. So when we go to the COP30 in Belem, adaptation is going to be a priority for all of Africans. When we see, it's good to have a united voice before COP Summit, because if some of African countries says mitigation is our priority or loss and damage is just transition is our priority, we can not get the result we want. But if all African countries says adaptation is our priority, we're going to get a unified answer and a unified voice before the World Summit.
Absolutely. So Ethiopia is taking bold measures to address climate change by implementing the Green Gas Initiative. How do you assess its contribution to fight against climate change and how it is exemplary for the continent?
Regarding the contribution of Ethiopia, Ethiopia has making a good contribution. We can take a green legacy, which was initiated by our Prime Minister also. It started from 2009, according to Ethiopian calendar, and like it is said, we already planted more than 40 billion trees, and this will help the climate issues. And the other thing is, on the second date of the African Climate Summit, we also inaugurated GERD, Ethiopia Renaissance Dam. And this will also a great effect and a great contribution to the climate, because fossil fuels, coals, gases are the one we use for electricity and other things other times. But this one is hydraulic power, and it cannot have that much, it cannot have an emission like the others. It will not have effect like the others. So this will reduce Ethiopia's emissions that we used to emit by coal fuels and other sources of energies. And the other thing is it will reduce floods, because we have the Renaissance now, we have the biggest lake, which is Negat, so it will reduce floods. And during drought times, we can also use the lakes for the others. So this is also one of the contribution Ethiopia is taking for the climate issue. And the other thing is the GERD will not only be for Ethiopia. We will outsource it, or we will sell it to our neighbor countries like Djibouti, Kenya. We already have agreement with them. So we will reduce other emissions for Kenya also. We will reduce other emissions for Djibouti also. So it will also help the region or the Horn of Africa to reduce global emissions that will be created by fuel, gas, and the others.
Our discussion is what specific roles can young people play in advancing climate solutions both locally and nationally, in your view?
So youth, or like the future and the present generation, can play different roles in combating climate change. First one is advocacy and awareness creation. As we all know, most of the youth and young people are on social media, on different kinds of social media. If they're not posting, they're commenting. If they're not commenting, they're at least watching different kinds of videos, tweeting, those kind of things every day. So if we maneuver those kind of things, if we help guide the youth and young people to create more awareness on climate change, how it's affecting the rural areas, how it's affecting the vulnerable groups, how it's affecting the indigenous communities, we can reach more to the global society, not only locally and nationally, but since we are living in one planet, we are living in one earth, and this climate action needs a global cooperation, not just local. The local is mandatory and very important, and it needs to be looked upon, but since it's a global and hot issue, it needs to be spread throughout the world. Awareness creation needs to be spread out throughout the world. And another thing is in the innovation and technology area. So we are living in the digitalized era where different kinds of things are being digital, smart technologies are surrounding our cities, different kinds of things are being simpler, more eco-friendly, environmental friendly. So the youth, since we are the present and the future generations, we can contribute in the innovation and technology era. I mean, different kinds of green tech solutions and innovation are being created. The youth are the most powerful, energetic, and those groups who have entrepreneurial mindset. And this entrepreneurial mindset can be diverted into, if they want to create different kinds of if they want to create a thing that makes life easier, they would also think this thing makes life easier, and also it is eco-friendly, it's environmentally friendly, it is sustainable, it is useful for the community. Not only it's just kind of generates money and income, but also at the back of their mind, they would think, is this eco-friendly? ? Is this climate friendly? Is this environmentally friendly? So those kind of things would be set on the youth and young people. Other thing is cultural and creative engagement. I mean, the indigenous people have lived, let's say Ethiopia have like different over 80 plus nation and nationalities, 80 plus languages are spoken. So there are different kinds of indigenous groups who have been working on and how to combat climate change, on how to mitigate and how to use different kinds of adaptation techniques and methods for them to be able to kind of not get lost when the climate change happens, because climate change has been is being an issue now in recent days. due to different kinds of industrialization, greenhouse gas emission, it's getting more worse and worse, and it's being worked upon. But the indigenous communities and societies have had their own solutions. They have their own dynamics in which they live, in which they lead their society and community. So if we kind of interlink the indigenous community solutions with the kind of current solutions, it would be so great, so that the local, being locally rooted, but also being a global citizen is so much important. So yeah, I guess these are the areas or topics in which the youth can involve in their way in our fight to combat climate change.
How can youth innovations and initiatives be better supported to contribute meaningfully to climate response?
Okay, nice. Yeah, that's the real question. I mean, we have different kinds of innovations. We would have different kinds of ideas, technologies in regards to the climate aspect. But the question is, how do we implement it? How do we bring it to life? Not just kind of speak it on public, not just only creating awareness, but how do we make it a reality? So we need climate finance. That's been like in COP and Conference of Parties that have been going on for over like 30 years. The coming COP is going to be in Brazil. Climate finance for African countries, for different less developed countries, has been an issue, a question for the past couple of years. And in order for the ideas to be implemented, climate finance should be met. I mean, there are some things which could be solved through like negotiations and speaking, but there are things which also need the investment, the financing from the from different kinds of sectors. So if the young people's innovations and ideas got the right funding, got the right amount of finance, it would come to reality. But if we keep on kind of delaying the money we're asking, if we keep delaying the grants, if debts are going high, and if we are not being able to pay them, it would not be good. So we need to work on the climate finance area. And the other one is on the policy inclusion. I mean, different youths, different young people would gather up. You have different kinds of assembly, as we have seen the Africa Youth Climate Assembly also happened with the African Climate Summit, which was a pre-summit event. So this kind of areas, this kinds of opportunities provide young people for them to kind of share their voice, share their idea, and how their government, how the respected stakeholder needs to implement in this kind of situations. I mean, 70% of the African population in Africa are actually youths, so we should not only be represented, since we are the majority of the population and the majority of like the citizens on the continent. We need to come into like the forefront and to suggesting different kinds of policy reforms, giving our input and those kind of things. So we also need to be incorporated in policy reforms. And the other one is on education and capacity building. I mean, throughout our years, we go through like different kinds of educational systems, high school, say like on undergrads, graduate degrees. This environmental related issues should not be undermined, and it's being worked upon nowadays. Different kinds of like environmental related, eco-friendly things, being environmentally conscious, how like the world is evolving, what kind of climate issues are happening nowadays, what should be done, how we need both mitigation and adaptation, since like we are also facing the current challenges. We need adaptation as a priority, not just mitigation. So this kind of things need to be inculcated in the young generations, and so like when they come up front, they wouldn't say like climate action or like advocating for climate justice is a luxury, but they would know that it's a necessity, and they would know that it's affecting their young brothers and young sisters far away in the rural areas. Those who are not able to find clean water, those who are being displaced, those who are not having peace and security in their areas, they need to be able to be aware of those people around and advocate for them, work towards how they can make their lives easier. So I guess it's a responsibility for all of us, for me, for the young people, for governments, for different stakeholders, civil society. So this calls upon everyone who is living on this earth, which is basically every people. I mean, we are living on one planet, so this calls upon everyone who's alive.
During our discussions, what specific roles can young people play in advancing climate solutions both locally and nationally, in your view? How can the commitments of the African Youth Climate Assembly be translated into actionable policy at home?
ICA 2025 commitments can be translated into actionable priorities at home, first by aligning them with national priorities like the nationally determined contribution and also development plans. As we all know, the nationally determined contribution, or NDC 3.0, Ethiopia has launched its NDC 3.0 on the second African Climate Summit. So the first thing is aligning the commitments of the ICA 2025 with the national priorities, and the second one is turning the declarations into specific policy measures. For example, like adaptation strategies, youth inclusion frameworks, and also climate finance mechanisms. As we all know that Ethiopia has its own adaptation strategies and also climate finance mechanisms that we should work on youth inclusion frameworks. And also the third thing that we can translate ICA 2025 commitments into actionable home priorities is like by building accountability systems, which is a major topic here, building accountability systems like via monitoring, youth participation, and also reporting back. So we need to build accountability systems. So this all means that the governments and also the stakeholders take the shared vision from ICA 2025 or the African Youth Climate Assembly 2025 and also embed it in their own laws, budget allocations, and implementations plans. So at this time, the youth needs to have a technical, financial, and also capacity building, the three kinds of support from the government, the stakeholders, from the civil society organizations, and also from the private sector.
Financial, technical, or capacity building, or which one is most critical for empowering Ethiopians to drive climate action?
For empowering Ethiopian youth for climate action, we need all kinds of support. We need technical support from our expertise and also from government officials. We need technical support, financial support from private sector, civil society organizations. We need all kinds of support, and also we need the capacity building support. We need all kinds of support. So all kinds of support are very important for the empowerment of the Ethiopian youth to drive the climate action. I would like to say that we need to have a monitoring tool in youth inclusion frameworks. We need to have a youth inclusion framework. We are actively advocating for the youth inclusion in our nationally determined contribution, which has been launched in the second African Climate Summit. Ethiopia has launched its NDC 3.0 in the second African Climate Summit. So we need to have a youth inclusion framework in our adaptation strategies and our national adaptation plans, in our nationally determined contributions, and also in development plans. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our today's program. I will see you in another edition. I was Gosh Malisao. Bye-bye.